Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. All right everyone, it is that time of year. It is time to share my 2024 top 10 reads. I do have some honorable mentions. I also will start off with my stats as a whole. And this year has been full of ups and downs, I think, for all of us. But then again, what year isn't? I mean, there's always going to be ups and downs that we have. But this year, I don't know, it flew by. I feel like it's faster than any other. And I just can't believe it. I can't believe it. This is almost 2 full years of doing YouTubing full time. And I can't wait to see what the next year brings me. There are a lot of exciting things happening in 2025, and I can't wait to share them with you. Before I go any further too, I do genuinely, truly, deeply want to thank my patrons and channel members and viewers and watchers and supporters, because each year when I reflect back, I am just shocked that I get to do this every day and that there are people who care enough to make sure I get to do this every day, and that they appreciate my reviews and appreciate what I have to say about things enough to not only watch, but to some people actually pay to continue hearing them, you know? And so that's very humbling, and I don't ever want to lose sight of it or ever forget to be humble and grateful about it. And I hope that you see that I am genuine about that, because I absolutely am. I'm fully aware how lucky that I am, right? So just had to get that gush out of the way. My patrons hear about it all the time because I get very sentimental about those things there. But yeah, we're going to kick this off because I know this will be a long video. I love gushing about my favorites. Some of these will be, well, I mean, none of them will really be a surprise because I always share like what my 6-star reads are, which means they'll be in there, but it's always fun to see where they end up. I wasn't as strict with my rating scoring this time as I have been, mostly because I only had 14 6-star reads. One of them wasn't even romance anyway, so it's in my honorable mentions. I mean, it's still a 6-star read, but it's not like I didn't rank it in the top 10 here. But I do have a little rating scale that I put together a few years ago when I reread the books, because they all are still a 6-star, but I do like to have a definitive favorite. I just find it's more fun that way for me, because I look back and I can see what all of my top reads of each year are. And that's the book that those books I like to push the most and the ones that I recommend the most. And I love being able to do that. So last year it was P.S. You're Intolerable. Julia Wolf really cemented herself as a favorite author of mine. So, I mean, it'll be no surprise that you'll see her around on this list. But I was just really looking for much more genuine romances this year, and even the ones I read that are erotic in nature, because there are a few, I was really looking for an author who like knew that they were writing erotic romance, and by that I mean all of the intimacy and steam and spice is all purposeful. It isn't just to titillate. It isn't just to have those Instagrammable or TikTokable moments to pull out. And not that an author doesn't also need to think with his or her business brain, but I wanted to feel more than just that, because if an author is writing a truly romantic, powerful, beautiful story, those moments are just gonna be there, you know? So anyway, that is a preamble that I didn't need to give, but I think that it was clear, particularly for myself, when I was, filling out that little form that I make for myself to help me decide. I was finding that all of these books already fit in a couple of those categories because I had kind of weeded out those ones beforehand. But I am someone who still loves to very much give 5-star books, and you're going to see that because, like I said, we're going to start with my stats as a whole before we get into these. And having that 6-star rating really helps me be just absolutely free with my 5 stars, because I'm like, well, you can have a 5 star, because for a lot of other people, your 5 star is delegating your very favorite book. But I mean, I talk about this whenever I talk about my 6 stars, is that I don't want to just have to look at, is this my very, very favorite, to give it a 5 star? And that always comes back to the fact that I'm friends with a lot of authors. I know how much 5 star ratings help people, help authors, though that isn't my sole reason. I mean, I'm rating books for other readers to know what I think about them, you know. But I also would be, you know, it would be lying to say I don't also think about how that affects people sometimes, you know. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get into some of these stats so we can get to the list, because there is quite a few. Now, I do have all of them listed down below, but I encourage you to, you know, hold it in and wait so you can be there for the surprise if you want to know. But I won't put them in order in the description, like of you know, up to the highest, so that at least that's just a surprise. But I do have all of these books in the description, so you can go and purchase one if you want. It helps both me out and the author out if you do. So of course I want to link those down below, but I won't put them in order, at least, so that you have to stick around. Although, again, I think most of you will probably shadowed what my favorite books are a lot this year. So, stats for 2024. Here we go. I read 484 books / you know, pieces of literature, because again, this year I've tried not to call fan fictions books anymore, but all of those together. My goal is always 365. It has been for the last 4 years, so I hit that handily. My stretch goal was 500. I was pretty close to getting to that one, but you know, it wasn't the goal where I was like, I have to squeak out another 14 books or 16 books before I feel like it, but I read that many. Pages wise, I read 177,768 pages, which is crazy. As for the breakdown, this is where it's wild to me. So there was 150 physical books, 150 audiobooks, 172 ebooks, and 225 ARCs, or advanced reader copies / advanced listener copies. So that is wild to me. That's absolutely wild to me. Like, wow. That's crazy to me how many that I read. And the thing I always will point out too is that I do count if I'm reading them in multiple formats. So that's why, you know, 484 books is how many I read. But if you added up how many I read based on format, I believe it's like 615 or something like that. And that's because I often have an audio and a physical book, or an audio and an ebook, and I'll switch between them, or even be reading them at the same time, because I like to do that sometimes too. So that's why there are multiples of that at times. The subgenres of these, here we go. This is a long list because I have so many to talk about. So there was 177 contemporary, 110 dark, 13 dystopian, 38 erotic, 35 fan fictions, 44 historical, 34 fantasy, 10 paranormal, 8 science fiction, 11 suspense, and 4 other. And funny enough, those 4 others are all in my honorable mentions, which is exciting. I'm going to talk about those in just a second. But just a few other notes before I tell you the ratings. I am, based on how this worked out, I am planning to combine a couple of categories in the new year. I am going to combine like dystopian and science fiction, because at one point I'd separated those out because I was reading a lot of dystopian that I didn't quite feel like they fit in science fiction. You know, I'm particularly thinking of Claire Kent, and I'll tell you most of those dystopian then like were Claire Kent's. Because sometimes a dystopian like that, like, yes, it's science fiction as in like the world ended in it, but it doesn't always feel like science fiction, because those ones almost feel like, you know, they're living on a farm and they're surviving. So I wasn't sure, but I only read 8 that were straight up like sci-fi romance. So I think I'm going to mix those next year, but that's just one thing I'm going to do. The ratings of everything. Here we go. There was 34 6-star reads. Now, again, I've just said there is 15 6 stars that I gave, but I reread my favorites a lot. So there was 34 that I rated 6 stars, 106 5-star ratings, which, as you can tell, that is just a little under a quarter of all books I read, I give 5 stars to. 57 4.5 stars, 131 4 stars, 52 3.5 stars, 23 3 stars, 2 2.5 stars, 4 2 stars, and 9 DNFs. So we didn't have anything below a 2-star this time around. Really don't even use the lower ones at all. I usually will DNF, so there's that. But as you can tell, I do about 65 to 70% of all my ratings are above 4-star, because a good reason for that is just I know my reading taste pretty well. I don't venture outside of it too often, so that leads to a lot of high points. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get into what you're really here for. Let's start with my honorable mention. A couple that are non-romance, and then I only have one romance that's an honorable mention because everything else made it into the top 10. So my honorable mentions, one of them is Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff. I love this series, though it does try to rip my guts out. I will say that. Jay Kristoff has no mercy. He has no pity. He just wants to decimate you. But I love this series. So I'm not going to go into details about this one because it is an honorable mention, but this is book 2 in his Empire of the Vampire series. The audiobooks are divine. But this series is grimdark, it's painful, it hurts, and on the plus side though, I'll say this, it is still kind of like fantasy, and they are supernatural beings in here, so there are a lot of fake deaths, and I know people don't love that, it gets bitched about all the time, but I gotta tell you, I'm a big softie, and I'm a romance lover, and I'm okay if they're fake deaths sometimes. Okay, I'm okay with it. There's enough real ones that it's enough of that. But this is just such a great series. I highly recommend it. And yeah, it's so unique. But again, I won't go into everything about that one because we got to keep it moving. Series that I just truly enjoyed it. And I did give the last book 6 stars. So I wanted to put these in honorable mentions. But the trilogy that I read in this last quarter of the year was the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. This is a Asian-inspired, mafia-esque fantasy series with magic and with powerful elements and a family that, like I said, it's kind of like mafia-esque, and it's about struggles for power. It's about deep family connection and keeping a way of life going forward. And it's just, I cried multiple times, but I love this family so much. The Call family is like deeply ingrained in me. And like, as soon as I finished the series, I like wanted to start over, but I also don't want the pain again. I just don't right now. But Fonda Lee does have at least a co-authored book coming soon, and I will probably read that one as well. But the audiobooks I highly recommend. These are narrated by Andrew Cushino, and he is the voice of this series to me, and I love it. I love it so much, so I highly recommend. So these 4 books I just mentioned are actually the ones that, like I said, were my other, and they were all amazing. So I really don't read much outside of romance every year. I say this, I am perfectly happy being in my rut of romance. There are millions and millions of them to choose from, so I don't really need to venture outside of it to get what I want. But those are ones that I've been convinced to read, either because I already love the author, aka Jay Kristoff, love him, or Fonda Lee, who was highly recommended by Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life, and I just had to have it. So let us get into this with one other honorable mention that is a romance, and This is actually one of the few that I didn't end up with a reread yet. So as I said, I try to reread everything, but I don't have to reread everything. It's for me, it's a treat to myself. But I also had, I believe, 20 new releases that came out in December. So that meant I didn't get to every single reread I wanted. So this one could have maybe edged out another, like I was close with the bottom two on this one, but I just decided like it's going to be an honorable mention, and I do want to reread this one, and I think I'll probably use the audiobook, and then maybe I'll finish my like personal annotations of it when I do that. But anyway, this book that is my honorable mention was The Love Contract by Sophie Lark. I read this one in February last year, or I mean this year, but I'm filming this on the 1st of January, so I may end up saying last year sometimes, but obviously, you know. So this was her first book in the Love Contract series, and I'll just give you a little bit of info and a tiny bit of behind the scenes stuff. This series will get finished. It is going to get picked up by Bloom though, which is why it's like got pushed back, right? Because there's other books she was writing for them. She wrote Monarch. There is her Sparrow and Vine books that are coming first, and then that she'll go back to these ones. So I'm very sad we have to wait, because very much there was other characters who were set up and we haven't got to them, and I'm sad, particularly because one of the characters is going to be like the dad, Merrick, and the way that he's set up in here, I want to read his story so bad. But anyway, The Love Contract is kind of high school rivals. They were Theo and Sully. Theo is our heroine, and she currently works for a billionaire, and she's his private chef, and she's a bit unsatisfied with what she's doing for him. And then actually this high school like rival comes into the picture, Sully, who is going to blackmail her into fake dating him to help him with a deal with her boss. And so she ends up getting roped into it, and in doing so she, you know, gets kind of reintroduced to this family, which is twin brothers. There's Sully and Reese, and then their dad Merrick, and there's so much beautiful history about this family, but she gets reintroduced to them, and it really becomes like he blackmails her, but pretty quickly they're on the same side, and it becomes like a friends fake dating thing, and then it goes into lovers. Now this was the first book from Sophie in a while for me that really focused on like a slow burn romance. She often does some pretty quick flash burns. I mean, besides like Anastasia was really slow, and I love her writing. I enjoy it so much, but I'm really glad to see that she is able to adapt and able to change that, because before this one I had read Grimstone, and that just, it really wasn't my style. I wasn't a fan, and I wasn't sure, you know, what I was going to love from her that wasn't Mafia. I mean, I love her to death, obviously, but I just wasn't sure. You don't know. Sometimes an author changes their style and it's never quite what it was before. But this showed me that she is able to adapt, and she is going to be able to write more like regular contemporary. And she created these characters that were still a little bit eccentric, still a little bit like, you know, a little bit caricature in some ways, but their relationship was not. It was really beautiful, and I love Theo's connection with the dad, Merrick, when getting to know him, and when you find out about like the dad's loss, and he's a bit of an alcoholic in the beginning of this, and he was like a stuntman in Hollywood, and we find out that Sully and Reese's mom was this beautiful actress, and met his father there. So there's all this like background and things woven into it. So I'm really looking forward to more. I think the heartbreak, the sweetheart deal is supposed to be coming, and that one's going to be a fake dating reverse Grumpy Sunshine. And then the redemption clause will be the hot dad bodyguard and forced proximity, and that'll be Merrick's book. He'll be a bodyguard later. So I still love this so much, and I want to do the reread. There's an audiobook for this one now, and so this was only cut out by literally 1 point. Like I said, I rank these with points as I reread them to help me decide. And so even without the reread, I was able to still like do a point system, and it lost out by only 1 point to number 10 on my list. So it's still a 6-star, still very close, but with only having so few 6-star reads this year, it's a really tight competition too, because they're all ones that I really, really like. So Okay, now that we're almost a half hour in, we're getting into the top 10 here. So number 10 for me was Honeycut by Sierra Simone. So this is book 2 in the Lioness trilogy, and I was so excited to read this, but also terrified, because Sierra Simone she writes erotic romance. She often writes polyamory. She writes BDSM. She writes very sexy books. But she, like I said near the beginning of this, how there was a few books that were erotic on my top list, and she is someone who writes erotic romance like no other. She's actually, for me personally, the author that truly showed me the difference between erotic romance and just really spicy romance or erotic cut. Like, when I am trying to explain erotic romance to someone who just wants to lump it all together or doesn't think there's a difference, this is the author I point out. And I first was told about this author, you know, her book Priest was like the taboo book to read back when. And the podcast that really pointed that out to me was Fated Mates, which has the Fated Mates podcast has Jenn and what's her name? Sarah McLean do it, and they had actually interviewed her, and I listened to an interview about Sierra Simone way back. This was many years ago now. And when I listened to her talk about erotic romance and why she writes it and why she puts taboo themes in it, it really opened my eyes. So now when I read an erotic romance, I'm looking for the things that she talked about. And to me, what is that? Let me explain it before we go on. It is that in erotic romance, sex isn't just there. Sex moves the story forward, and the character development happens through the intimate relationship of the characters, through the sex. So does that mean there's lots of sex in erotic romance? Usually, but it doesn't always mean there is. There are some erotic romance that there's still erotic romance, and it doesn't mean that there's a sex scene in every chapter, because the author still does the powerful character work through the sex scenes, okay? It doesn't mean it's not happening anywhere else, but it means that, so the best difference, I'll use the most layman's term. The layman's term is, in a romance that is very sexy, but not erotic romance, if you took out all the sex scenes or you made them all closed door, you wouldn't miss out on anything, okay? It would just go from being open door to a closed door, right? So pretty much, you know, any romance that isn't erotic, you'd be able to do that, you know? Whereas like erotica, if you close the door, you don't have a story at all, because it's all sex is what erotic is, right? But erotic romance, if you close the door, you would be missing key character points, and you would be missing key scenes. And so if you skipped every sex scene, if you closed the door on every scene, you wouldn't feel that it was a complete story, okay? So that's the best way to explain the difference. Where if you, I mean, I'll even do this. This isn't to say anything bad about it. This book is, I mean, one of the lower amounts of sex that Sophie Lark has in a book anyway. But if you close the door on the scenes in here, this is still a beautiful romance. It has great tension. It has great connection. It has great, chemistry, all those things. And so if you close the door, you just have this beautiful contemporary romance with closed door scenes, and it'd be fine. You wouldn't be missing out on any like major character developments. Yes, there's still some when you're, especially after a sex scene where you're intimate in, you know, the cuddling, the talk, like that's important. But with Sierra Simone, if you close the door on those scenes, you would be confused as to the story. You'd feel very lost, and it isn't as satisfying to you. So after that long-winded explanation, I'm sorry, but I feel like I need to share the difference, because I do have one other erotic romance on my favorites as well. And it's something that I think when people who, and this isn't to call anyone prude or anyone, there's anything wrong if you don't want to read that. Like, maybe erotic romance isn't for you then, because with some books that are the like TikTok famous or whatever, if you're annoyed by how much sex is in them, you can still skip those scenes, and number one, you probably finish the book a lot faster because of whatever, but you still maybe have a cute romance left behind. If you cut out the development between Isolde, Tristan and Mark that happen in bedrooms, you are missing so much, because those dynamics, those mind games, the moments when they're vulnerable, the moments when we're making progress with the characters, it's happening while they are most vulnerable with their clothes off or with a dick in them or whatever, because that's where it's happening. And that is why a lot of BDSM romance is erotic romance, because in BDSMs, particularly BDSM with healing or whatever, the dynamic play is where the character development is, because it's a heroine learning she can be vulnerable and still be in control, and it's a hero who desperately needs control, seeing how precious it is when someone gives it to him, and you need to be in a sex scene to show that. So yeah, that's why pretty much all of Sierra Simone's books have some form of kink in them. But it's not the kink itself, it's the vulnerability and the dynamic that tell the story. So anyway, this is book 2 in a series anyway, so I don't want to spoil too much, but it does start with Salt Kiss. And there is a novella that starts it off too that actually shares the relationship of Isolde and Mark that we kind of miss in the story. But Salt Kiss, which came out, that one came out the year before, was a lot of Tristan's journey, and he has become this bodyguard for Mark. He's an ex-soldier. Mark is this powerful billionaire. He is a bisexual, deviant, power-hungry king in a lot of ways. Not an actual king, but like a king. And he is going to be marrying for like political / power purposes this woman named Isolde. And in the first book is Tristan first becomes the bodyguard to Mark and becomes his sexual plaything too. And then something happens where it is in this time before Mark marries Isolde, and they've both agreed they can do whatever they want before the marriage. They only need to be faithful once their marriage starts, blah, blah, blah. And Mark isn't able to go pick up Isolde. They're supposed to take his yacht from one place to the other, and then she's going to move in with him, and it'll be time for them to get married. And so he sends Tristan instead. And Tristan not only now has discovered that the man he's falling for is going to be getting married, but he's sent to go get this woman. And their time on that boat together, something happens between them. So that's Salt Kiss. We see Tristan falling for Mark and then falling for Isolde, and now all three of them are back together. And the cliffhanger on Salt Kiss was them showing up here with Mark now, and now there's this little triangle of games happening. And so this has a lot of mind games happening. Also, Isolde is kind of a plant to begin with. She is marrying Mark, and she has a job she's supposed to do. She's a trained assassin. And she's fallen in love with Tristan, and she wants to fall in love with Mark. So there's all these things going on. There is cheating happening in here. There's also a sex club where Mark like owns it and runs it, and Isolde needs to be his submissive when they're there. And so there's all of these sexual mind games happening, and there's a lot of angst because Isolde and Tristan, once Isolde marries Mark, right, they're not supposed to be with anyone else anymore. But both Mark and Isolde have feelings for Tristan, and Tristan has feelings for them. And so whenever the three of them are in the same place, they all have to pretend that it isn't like that. But then when any two of them are alone, there are true feelings. So there's so much. Like Sierra Simone just ties you up in knots. And then when we get to the end of this one, and we're finally going to possibly have a, you know, we're like, oh, we can make this work. This could be a triad. This could be amazing. There is something awful that happens, and we're left with a cliffhanger because there's still one more book to come. And this was so angsty and agonizing. So part of the reason this one isn't ranked a little higher is because it is the middle book, and we don't have a resolution yet. And so it's kind of just a torture book right now because, yeah. But it is so powerful in the way that she writes that, where you are just, you want to slap them all, but you also want to hug them all. She's a cut above the rest. She definitely is. Okay, then I'll talk a bit quicker about this one because I just read this one so we won't tear it apart. But it was The Horde King of Shadow, and I'm not going to tear it apart. This is a 6-star read, but this was one that, I was so happy to read a new book from Zoe Draven. This is a spin-off of the Horde Kings of Drakkar. This one is the Hordes of Elphica, and this is basically a dragon rider romance. See, they're dragons. And in this one, we have Clara, who has spent her life trying to understand the strange dreams that have plagued her. She has visions of dragons in a world with no written record. And she is a princess, but she's kind of a rejected princess, we'll say. And then we have Sarkin, who's the king of the Sarathian horde, and he's a dragon rider. And he needs to find more heartstones because they are the source of power for the dragons, the Elphica. And if he can't find more heartstones, the dragons are going to die out, and they don't want that to happen. And so he's been told of a woman who's having visions of the heartstones. So that would be Clara. So he shows up at her nation and says that he wants her as a wife. And if he can't have her, then he will burn down Dothic. And so her first duty as a queen is she's supposed to claim a dragon herself. So this weak, quiet, meek, bookish girl is made a queen of the horde, and you have to be strong, you have to be powerful, you have to have your own dragon. And so there's a lot of training sequences we have. But I also loved how their connection begins. We do have, we must mate for our bond to be true. And so he feels like he's pushing himself on her because he wants her, and she's someone who's been neglected and ignored by her family. So having someone who wants to pay attention to her is very appealing. She's also terrified of flying a dragon, and she's not from a people who rides dragons. So how could she have prepared for this? And then I also love the dragons. I love both, his name is Sarkin. I wanted to say Zartik, which is something else. Sarkin's dragon is amazing. Now, the dragons don't talk, but you can kind of communicate with them with your mind. So it's not like regular talking back, but there is they can understand you, and they can send back impressions and things like that. So that's really cool. And then I also really loved when we meet who will be her dragon as well. It was really cool. So I just love this one. I know that some people have a problem with how this one went, but I was just wowed by it. I love their relationship. I love how it grew. I love dragon riding training sequences. So this really scratched the itch. And I think, I'm going to say it. I think if you liked Fourth Wing, there are definitely some comparisons. And in fact, I think the plot could be, better written than that, Okay, number 8. We have the other erotic romance on this list, and that is Sovereign by Rhea Morris Edwards. So this book was a complete surprise to me, and I loved it, okay? And I did finish my reread, and I loved it even more, okay? I stand by it. Now, a few things before I get into it. When I read this book, I gushed about it all over. I gave it 6 stars. I yacked about it. And so a lot of people picked this up and read it because I was gushing about it, and it's very sexy. This one is an erotic romance, as I said, and there is a lot of sex, okay? This is a type of training you into BDSM type of thing. This is a dark cowboy billionaire named Gerard Sovereign. And in the beginning of this book, our heroine, Kiara, is married to Sovereign's enemy. Very quickly, we remove said enemy. And then a few months into her being a widow, he makes her an offer to help her pay off some debt that her husband had owed when he died by her becoming his submissive. Now, she's like, what? I don't want to do that. I just want to be free. And he's like, well, you're not free either way, so let me have you. Now, what's funny is he tells her she's not free. But what was really beautiful about this and why this worked is that the way that I love BDSM is because it does help free people in a lot of ways. Because sure, she has locked herself into this situation with him. And I do love that we pointed out, she's like, is this a legal contract? And he's like, no, BDSM is an honor system. This contract is more just sharing what our expectations are for each other, and we need to communicate. And he's like, there's punishments if you don't communicate with me, because That's the most important thing. I'm not doing this to torture you. He's like, I want to find things that you like all the good things that a good Dom would say. But it does have the bit of a darker edge where he does kind of manipulate her into starting it, but she does still have a choice. You know, she could continue working, you pay off a debt, or she'd have to sell off the land. Like, there are options. But Kiara is an orphan. She's now a widow. She wasn't really loved by her husband anyway. He married her to get her land. And her father, who she did love, was very sickly. And, you know, she married herself off to her first husband so that she could find love and have a place to live and be safe. And then he only wanted her for her land, and in fact was going to be willing to kill her at one point so that he could be done with her, whatever. And so to have the thing about this BDSM deal that is so attractive to her is not just because he's attractive, like that. This is one that is pretty lust forward at the start. It's why it being an erotic romance is so important, because we know they're attracted to each other. We know he wants her because she's submissive and beautiful and hot. Like, that's true. That's his initial reason for wanting her. Also because she's his enemy's wife and he wants to stick it to the guy, you know? So all those things are true. But once they start interacting this way, they are getting fed from each other so well. The way that he takes care of her, the way that he sees to her needs, the way that he doesn't just want her as this so he can do whatever he wants to her. Like, he loves taking care of her. He likes the, like, I want to spoil you. Like, all those aspects of one, you know, what we love about a billionaire, but like in this are so powerful. And there's so many moments in here. Let me see if I find one. There's so many moments in here where she's finding herself feeling free. Like, there's this moment in here, like when she signs the contract. Here we go. This is one. It says this. It says, she says, what's the worst that could happen? Slowly, I realized I've been asking myself the wrong question. I should be asking, what's the best that could happen? Again, this is before she signs the contract, right? The best would be good sex, having him listen to me like I'm the only person in the world, letting him call me Redbird, falling asleep in his warmth every night. I want to experience that, even if it doesn't last beyond this year. Sign it, Redbird, he says quietly. Sign it and let me give you everything. For the first time, it feels like opening a door instead of closing it. So I thought that was so beautiful, because he does back her into this corner, but she can say no. He does manipulate things to have her because he wants her and he's a billionaire and he can have her. But it's also really beautiful because he makes her more free than she ever was, right? And that's something that's beautiful about a complex BDSM relationship like this, because it's not just about him being in control and being in charge. It's about him caring for her and seeing to her needs before she even thinks to ask, being sensitive to when things are upsetting her, getting her to talk about things, helping her cry. Like, that is really beautiful. They have a maintenance spanking early on, which is he calls it, he's like, this is to remind you to, you know, do what I say and allow me to take care of you. And he spanks her until she can cry. And she's like, I've never been allowed to cry. And he's like, crying feels good. It's okay. So by spanking her and initiating that, she's able to like purge so many feelings she's been holding. And it's such a beautiful moment of catharsis. So there's tons of those moments in here. This is very loose on the other plot. It's very much about the BDSM relationship. And so I swing back around to the fact that a lot of people picked this up when I was gushing about it because A, it's a dark cowboy romance and it's really sexy. And that is like all the rage right now, reading dark, sexy cowboy romance. I get it. But this is first and foremost an erotic BDSM romance. The cowboy billionaire situation is just the setting in which we've plopped it down. And so a lot of people are unsatisfied with this. They think there's too much sex. They think there's nothing in between the two of them. And I'll tell you probably why, is if you don't have the stomach for, and I don't mean that in a derogatory, like if you don't have the stomach to read a sex scene every other chapter or a book that is that much, and you start skimming the sex scenes, well, you're missing the romance being built. because this is erotic romance, okay? So I stand by what I say. This is a 6-star read to me because as soon as, like literally as soon as I read the 3rd chapter where he's saying what he wants from her, I was like, this is an erotic romance. And I was then reading it with the eyes of what's happening in these sex scenes. So that's not me being smarter than anyone else or doing that. It's just with my lens of reading it, I was reading it as I would read, right, a book by Sierra Simone, or as I would read a book by Pam Godwin that focuses on those. And so, yes, all the sex is hot, but when I'm reading those sex scenes, I'm not just reading it for like, oh, wow, he did something really kinky in that. I'm looking at it as like, what are they giving and exchanging in these scenes? And that's not something everyone cares to do or cares to look for. So when people were reading this and, you know, some people speeding through really fast or listening to the audiobook or being like, wow, there's so much sex, what did Jen like about it? I'm like, well, yes, a lot of the sex there's a lot because the sex is the vehicle for the character work. And I think that Rhea did a great job with that. Now, the other thing that I'll put into that is that I have read Weston, and I liked Weston a lot too, the next book. But I don't know that I will continually love books in this series because it's clear that they're all going to be BDSM and they're all going to involve this type of situation. And I don't necessarily need to read 5 books in a series that are all this level of it. Like this one worked very well for me, but Weston felt a bit like an echo of it. And again, that's not derogatory towards the author. She's writing a dark cowboy BDSM series. When that type of dynamic is a series, I do roll my eyes a little bit because I'm like, okay, everyone in this series is into BDSM. And it's not in a big city. We're in a small town in the middle of like Montana, and every cowboy uses his rope and chaps and whips on everyone. I'm just kind of like, meh. But that's just me like trying to make reason in a scenario that's like, this is what it's supposed to be. So I'm still going to continue to read the series, but like Weston didn't scratch my itch the same way this one did because I've now read this. And there's a lot about Weston that it's still different. That one is still fun, but it wasn't a 6-star read the way this one is. And with Deacon, which is coming in April, that still looks like a lot of fun too, but I wonder if she will explore a different version of the dynamic, because though Diane is a very different character than Kiara, she still is looking for the same type of thing that Kiara is. And so it felt redundant. If we're going to keep doing BDSM scenarios where it's the man is always dominant and it's always this and that, I need there to be something different that the heroine needs that he's able to give her, and not just through a different kink. Like I need it to be like they need to let go of something else, right? So that can be an analysis for another video, but I still stand by Sovereign as a 6-star book for me. But I also understand why when people were running to read it, they were like, what's even happening here? Like nothing's happening in here. And I'm like, well, we were looking for different things to happen. Like I was watching her journey to freedom, and I was watching him like realizing that it's okay for him to love like one person and find a home in a person again, which he didn't have before. So we need to move along because this video is going to be long. We knew it. But all right, next up we have we have a few cowboys on this list, right? But the next cowboy is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. So I was actually surprised where this one and Wild Love ended up, because they're both on this list. I love them both, and I did just finish my rereads of these, and man, they still held up, and I was so happy about that. I really was. Yeah, just love this couple so much. So this one is Skylar Stone. She is a country music starlet, seen as sweet and innocent, and she's at the end of her rope. And so she's actually going to be collabing with Ford and his daughter, actually, which again, we'll get to Wild Love in a little bit. That one will be here. And so she's going to Rose Hill, and she's going to be staying there and working on a record with Ford. And she's doing this because she just needs to get away from it all. She's found out a lot of scary revelations between her parents, and this was kind of like initiated by like her parents getting a divorce, because she finds out that the assets that her parents are fighting over in the divorce are hers. She has been Skylar Stone for years, making the money, doing the touring, doing the interviews, doing all the things, and she owns a very small percentage of her own business. And so, like, yeah, her parents getting a divorce are arguing over, like, what she thinks should be her assets. Now, we don't get into the full back of that, but, like, a star is a business in themselves. There are a lot of people that they support. That is how it is, like, especially if your family helped build you. But her parents do it in such a shitty way. It still worked for me that we have it be that. But anyway, she gets to this town and she doesn't start off on the right foot. She tries to get too close to a bear in the beginning, and West actually rescues her from said bear, and it is kind of a funny beginning for the two of them. And so when I first started this book, I was like, uh-oh, how annoying and dumb is this character going to be? But it's very quickly dispelled. And Weston is a single dad. He has a son and a daughter that are both adorable. And he is actually a very big fan of Skylar Stone. So he knows who he hath rescued from a bear. But he plays it cool because he's like, I'm not going to fanboy all over her. And he even plays it cool when she ends up staying in his guest house, because the place she's supposed to live in, Ford and Rosie don't have it ready yet for her. So she ends up living in his bunkhouse, which is run down a bit and has a cute little squirrel, or not a squirrel, a mouse as a companion in there. She also has a bird named Cherry. I love her bird. She's so fun. So anyway, this is a relationship between them while she is there for I don't think it's like just the summer or anything. It might be the summer, working on this album and finding herself. And though, again, he does hide how big of a fan he is of hers for a while, he's able to help her get out of her head by being crazy Ford self. So he was a former, like, bad boy, tattoos on his knuckles. He was wild. He smoked pot. He sold pot for a bit when he was young. And he was just a bit wild. But now he's a dad, and he's still a bit crazy, but he trains horses. He's a very loving guy. He's the life of the party. But he also has some secrets, too, where he's worried about ending up alone because his marriage didn't work out. He's still friends with her. They co-parent very well. But, like, his best friend is now with his sister. Again, wild love there. And when he doesn't have his kids with him, when it's the weeks he doesn't have his kids, he just is, like, barely existing. So whenever he's around people, he's the life of the party. And it's not even that, it's not like he's depressed when he's alone. It's that, who is he? You know, he just, when he's alone, he's like, what am I doing here, you know? And I related to West so much in that aspect. I mean, I know I'm not a single parent, I'm not that, but it's that thing of like, I'm alone most of the time and I don't have any prospects for my future right now. It's my work, which I love my work, but it's my work and my books, and I'm like, what am I without it, you know? And how would people remember me without it? So I really did connect with Wes, especially on the reread. I was remembering those things about him, and it's very interesting. So anyway, this is a beautiful relationship between them. She really finds herself again. I know that's cliche, but like, she does. She finds herself again. She finds her inspiration again, and she finds her backbone of like, I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and everyone else can go suck it. And I love that about her. I love watching her be who she wants to be and them finding a way to make this relationship work. It was great. Okay, number 6 was Sweet Prison by Neva Altaj. So I won't go too much into this one because this is another one just like The Horde King, where it just came out. I've talked about it in the last like 2 or 3 videos that I filmed, so I don't want to go through the whole thing again, and this video is already going to be so long, and we still have the top 5 to get through. But this is book 10 in her Perfectly Imperfect series, and it's my favorite one she's written. To me, it has the best character development. It's a slow burn. It has a man who's been in prison for 18 years, and he is writing letters back and forth with his young stepsister, who has become his, like, woman on the outside while he is in prison. He's supposed to be the mafia don when he gets out, but some people are lying and trying to hide some things from him. And so through coded letters that Zahara writes to Massimo in prison, she keeps him informed of what's going on, but they haven't seen each other in person since she was 3 years old. And when they meet in person, when she's 17, he is like, wow, this is not my baby stepsister anymore that I thought it was. And when he finally is released from prison a few years later, she is the only person who like knows him at all anymore. His mind is messed up from being in prison so long. He doesn't know how to quite be on the outside. He has these rages that he falls into. She's the only one who can calm him. There's some serious sexy things that happen in this one, but it's a slow burn to get there, and I love that about it. Like, really, I love the slow burn to get there. It just made it feel so real to me to take our time to get there, and I loved how she has made herself this meek, quiet, secluded girl, has made herself not only invaluable to him, but she has a backbone now, and she's willing to stand up to him and to stand up to other people, and she won't be pushed around. And he kind of created her in that aspect, and now he doesn't know how to handle it when he gets out, because she won't just be pushed aside. He's like, no. Or she's like, I want you, and I'm going to have you. And yeah, some people are going to raise their eyebrows because they are step siblings. But again, he's been in prison for 18 years. He wasn't making a move on her as a child by any means. And they're not blood related. So there's going to be some eyebrows raised because they're in the mafia and they're very like traditional and everything. But it's going to work out. And it's going to be amazing. And I love this one. And I'm so impressed with how Neva's character development skills have improved so much. Like, I always think her characters have been good. Just back when because even when she wrote tighter, shorter stories, right? Like, Broken Whispers is like half the length of this one. And I still find that to be a very powerful, strong story. And she created those characters so, like, quickly. And she's just expanded on that more and more. And I love seeing it so much. Okay, number 5 is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So, as I was hinting at, this one is about Ford Grant, who absolutely love. He is the older brother of Willa Grant, who has graced my top 10 list in the past. I believe Heartless was my favorite book in 2022 at this point. Yeah, I think it was 2022. So Wild Love was the start of the Rose Hill series. And I was a bit nervous to read this one, as I've said, because I hadn't really cared for the last couple books by Elsie. Like, they were okay. I liked them at the time, but I just felt like she was trying to fit into a certain way so far. Now, to be fair, because her books have reached such a huge audience now, there's more and more people reading her. And I know a lot of people were disappointed with this one. But I was disappointed with Hopeless. And I felt that her heroine, like, didn't make any sense. The super horny virgin, it's not that can't be a horny virgin. Hello, been there myself, absolutely. But it was how she was portrayed. I just didn't feel like it made sense for her to be that way based on where we were and all those things. And I feel like she heard that. I mean, that would be not from me, but just from some people being frustrated with that, because this had such a fresh, like, feel to it to me. This is a, like, childhood rivals to, still rivals to lovers. And it also is a hero who's been pining away for decades for this woman, but in the sweetest way possible. So in the beginning of the story, we have 2 roads that these people are down. So Ford, he finds out he's a dad. Now, this doesn't have any other woman drama, because this actually happened through a sperm bank. And when he was like older, like, was he 18, 19, he donated to a sperm bank to get money for concert tickets. And the daughter who came of that, her father has died, and the mother is not doing well. She's very depressed. And she ends up wanting to find out who her dad is. She doesn't have any grandparents or anything. And so it's a weird start. I know some people had issues with it, but I liked it because I love single dads. But I also love that he was a single dad who doesn't have, like, a baby mama or other woman to deal about. Like, I love that concept. It was so great. And anyway, she makes herself known and actually is going to stay with him for a while the mother goes to, like, a facility. Now, it's not for drugs, it's for, like, depression. She's very depressed, not taking care of her daughter the right way. And so he takes her in, and very overwhelmed by it all, but he's ready to do it. He wants to get to know his daughter and all those things, and it's great. I love that start. And then we have Rosie, who she has lived out of town for I think like 10 years or so, and she's working for this company, and her boss makes a move on her, and she rejects him, and then he goes to HR before she's able to, and so she gets fired because they didn't want to give her a chance, literally, to put in a complaint. So she goes back to Rose Hill, planning to just stay for a little while, and it feels so good to be back around her brother, who is a single dad with 2 kids, and she ends up asking Ford, well, telling Ford to hire her to be his assistant for, he's starting Rose Hill Records. So all of that's the setup for this. And yes, it's a lot to get going there with that. But he is obsessed with her. He is. And so there's these beautiful moments where he puts on this grouchy exterior and she thinks he hates her. But I mean, not like hate her, but thinks it's his best friend's like annoying little sister, when really he's absolutely in love with her. And he's always been there to help. And as she starts to work for him and she really starts to pay attention to these things, she realizes how, like, there's this really beautiful moment where when she's telling him to hire her, she's like, I can't believe you're doing that. And he's like, Rosie, when have I ever told you no? And then goes back to what he's doing. And she's like trying to think of something to throw in his face. And she realizes that no, he's never said no to her. He's picked her up from parties. He's been there when she's sad. He's had her back when, like, her brother was a troubled kid, like we said, and he was there for her when, through all these things, he's always been there for her. And there's this really beautiful moment, like, he'd picked her up from this party where things had gone wrong, and she's like, wow, you got here so fast. And he says, I would have broken every speed limit to get to you. And this is a line then that she remembers over and over whenever he's doing something really sweet or caring. She'll remember, I would have broke every speed limit to get to you. And yeah, so this is really beautiful because then, like, kind of the next step of this one is that they're both really attracted. They end up having a kiss and he wants her really bad, but she's his employee now. And so he's like, Rosie, you just had a boss who made a move on you. We can't be together while you're my employee. And she goes about proving, like, well, number one, I want you to touch me. And number two, I'm not going to make it easy for you, for me to be working in the office with you and you not making a move on me. So there's that. There's also all the beautiful moments of him getting to know his kid and of having her, she's interested in music, so having her help with things with the recording studio. So much so, in fact, that she's interested in Skylar Stone. And he puts out an invitation to Skylar Stone to come to Rose Hill to make a record with him. And that's where Wild Eyes comes in. So I love this one. To me, this was going back to things I loved about her. This one was not sex forward. This one was this guttural longing, this pining that he has. He falls first. Getting introduced to the characters in Rose Hill was just amazing. And I loved all them. We get a visit from Willa, which was great. Willa shows up, which was cool. And yeah, getting to know Cora, the daughter that he didn't know he had. She has had a pretty tough life, having her parents be going through what they went. Her father had a long-term disease before he had died even too. So there was just a lot she'd missed out on. I should say, I believe she's 12 too. So yeah, it's just, it was so good. I loved it, and it really revitalized my love for her, which then, you know, when I read Wild Eyes, I loved it. We have, what's the next one coming? What's the next one? I can't remember now. I'll put up a picture if I remember to, but it blanked. But that one's going to be A Marriage of Convenience. That one's going to be good too. So, all right, let's continue. Here, we're in hour number 2 we've entered now. So, number 4 for me was Jump on 3 by J. Wolfe. This was the 3rd book in her Savage Academy series. This is about Evelyn and Ivan. Evelyn is on the autism spectrum, and her twin sister found her love in the second book. But her twin sister at one point was actually into Ivan. Ivan is both of their friends, but she was really into him and he rejected her. And so Ivan is actually into Evelyn, and he, you know, tries to make that known to her. He very much pays attention to the things that are important to her and like how she processes things. He's trying to get a good feel for that. And the thing is that she doesn't think she can ever make a move with him because her sister liked him at one point, even though her sister literally has a boyfriend now and is totally into him and is over Ivan. She's afraid of stepping on things. And so Ivan is like, okay, well, if you're never going to be able to see me as anything different than like belonging to your sister, then I'm going to stop. And as soon as he then stops being around all the time, she realizes that she was getting attached to him. So Ivan is actually he's Russian. His father's a Russian oligarch paying for him to go to school here at Savage Academy, and also help with some of his business endeavors in the area. And so Ivan actually has to he has to leave campus a few nights a week to go and help at a club his father's invested in. And Evelyn wants to know where he's going all the time. So she actually follows him and then learns about this part of his life. And anyway, once these two start getting on the same page and start working on that, like their relationship is so beautiful. Ivan cares about her so much and he just proves it in everything that he does. And even if that means having to like throw off the weight of his like father's plans for him and all those things, like he's willing to do what he needs to for her. And I love seeing that. It makes me so happy to see. And I love them all. They're just so great. I love this one. And yeah, this is they're 18-year-olds in here. So this is a new adult last year of like high school type story, but Julia Wolf makes me believe it. Okay. She makes me believe it. Okay, number 3, and I swear I didn't even plan this, but when I rated all of my books, these two were only off by 1 point. So my number 3 on my list is In the Details by Julia Wolf. And man, this was amazing. So this is book 1 in the Mile High Billionaires, and in this series, this first billionaire is actually Clara. So Clara is the older sister of our hero from Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife. Luca is that guy's name. And their family owns Rossi, is it just motorcycles? I don't know. But they make motorcycles. And Clara is actually a single mom. We find out what kind of goes down with her, how she becomes a single mom if you read Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife, but it does tell you in this one. You can start with this series if you want. It's fine. I don't know why you would skip the other series though, because that one had P.S. You're Intolerable, which was my favorite book last year, but whatever, you can skip it if you want. And this one involves Clara. This is like 5 years later, I think, because I think her daughter's like 3 or 4 or something. And she will go on a drive every once in a while and go to this biker bar. And there's this guy there named Jake that she always runs into, and they end up hooking up. And they have some hot encounters where they only know each other's first name and they'll hook up and that's it. And for her, this is like her dream. This is her dream guy. This is her escaping reality for a little bit. That's all that it is for her. But then we have a few interactions that really change things up. So number 1, she has a problem with a tail light one night, and she has to get it fixed before she can drive home. The police officer is being a dick to her, whatever. And so she stops in at this place to get it fixed. And who's the guy who's going to fix it but actually Jake? And Jake ends up thinking that she had stalked him there. And we'll get into like why he thinks he'd be stalked. And she's like, why would I stalk you with my daughter? Because she's now with her child. And she's like, I didn't want anyone to know, like, you didn't need to know I had a kid. And he's like, did you think I, like, didn't notice? He's like, I know what stretch marks, what they're from and everything. And he's like, it was fine. Like, we were meeting up to hook up, you know? And they have a weird interaction, but he loves her little girl. It's cute. So he then kind of is, like, rude to her by the end of that, though. and thinks like, am I not good enough because I have dirt under my fingernails, because he'd been working at this automotive place. And she's like, that is a really low blow of you to say, and I'm glad I don't ever have to run into you again. And so they leave that encounter kind of like pissed with each other. But of course they're going to run into each other again, because Jake isn't actually like a mechanic all the time. His family actually owns that like realm of like auto shops. And his older brother, Jeremy, is working on a business deal with Rossi. And so Jeremy and Jake come to meet Luca and Clara and the business team. And he explains that, well, once a week I work in the shop because I like being there. But the other days I wear a suit. And so now they have seen each other again. And he's like, you know what? We keep running into each other. It's meant to be. And so he convinces her to go on a date with him, get a babysitter, let's go on a date, and let's actually try this. And they both have been hurt before, and we also discover not too long into this that Claire's not the only one who has a daughter. And that is going to get them in a very interesting situation. But I loved this so much. Julia Wolf knows how to write a hunk, okay? She knows how to write the swooniest of swoony heroes that you've ever read. And this is absolutely fantastic from beginning to end, okay? It gets a bit melodramatic with what the third act conflict is. It gets a little bit like, it's a bit much type of story. But I don't care, because the way that he treats her, the way that he treats her daughter, the way that he treats his daughter, the way that he like is so loving and caring, I don't care about the other stuff, right? And when you read Julia Wolf, just be prepared for swoon and just hotness and pretty like low angst. This was a bit of an angstier one just because of what's happened in their past and everything, but her books really are about you reading heroes that are the best that exist, okay? Her heroes are such simps for their heroines. It's ridiculous, right? And Claire is someone who doesn't need anyone to take care of her. Also, she's the older woman. She's 37. He's 30 years old. And she just doesn't need anyone. But Jake is like, but you deserve someone who will take care of you. And he also needs to have the guts to want to try love again too. Not because he has an ex-wife. He actually never married the mother of his child. They do co-parent very well. But because he actually had a girlfriend previously who really wrecked him. And his daughter too. And so he's very hesitant to fall for someone again. So that's going to put them all in some sticky situations. But in the details, absolutely wonderful. You can read this one as a standalone, and it's the beginning of a series. But, I mean, so good. Sorry, I had to reposition a little bit, turn some of my backlights on, because it is still the darkest time of the year. So I started filming this at noon today, and it's already, like, very cloudy and, like, getting dark. So, but let's keep pushing on. We're almost there. We're up to the top 2 stories here. So number 2 for me was Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. Now, I knew how much I love this. I knew that I was not wrong to give this one 6 stars, but it's been a long time. I read this one very early on in the year. It was actually one of my 12 recs from 12 friends, which I'm actually not doing that challenge this year, but I'm glad that I did it in 2024 partially because I read this book. And this was recommended by Melissa from the Book Bar. And this was previously an indie published book, but it got scooped up very quickly, got traditionally published by Atria. And book 2, Unloved, is coming in February, which I do have an arc of. I need to read it very soon. I'm so excited for that one. But this is a college hockey romance. It's new adult. And I was not expecting it to pack the punch that it did. And then when I looked at, when I was going to reread this, I look at, all of these books that I'd read. And I was like, will that college romance still hold up to all these other ones I've read? Well, darn tootin' it did. Okay, so I listened to the audiobook this time. Actually listened to it while I was making some Christmas presents, because I had annotated this one actually the first time I read it, because it was also a Patreon read, and I loved it then. So this one is about Reese and Sadie, and Reese is a hockey player. He was injured in the previous season. He got a concussion. He had actually some time where when he opened his eyes, he couldn't see. He lost his sight for a small amount of time. And so he has PTSD from being on the ice. He will feel like claustrophobic sometimes. He'll have panic attacks. And he's a captain of his team, and he's going to be getting back into it soon. His father is a former player and is a coach, and his father is, I don't think his father is his coach. Am I wrong? Yes, is he? I think he is. I don't know. His father does a few things in here, but he still loves hockey, and he doesn't want to quit, but he doesn't know how to get back to what he was. And so he's very much struggling. And in the beginning of this, he's actually volunteering with his family's, like, they have a foundation that helps, you know, underprivileged kids skate and stuff like that. And so he's going to volunteer to help out with some of the, like, practice in the or like the kids and everything. And he meets this one little boy who is absolutely horrible at skating and doing it, but he's so enthusiastic and he really clicks with Reese, and it's very cute. And this first time that he's there, so this little boy also has a brother who's a little bit older. He's in one of the higher levels or one of the older grades or whatever. And they are the last two there, and their mom or dad hasn't come to pick them up. And right at the last minute here, late, this girl comes running in, and he's like, this can't be their mom. She's too young. And it turns out it's their sister, Sadie, who she's about like 10 years older than them, probably. She's 21. She's in college, and she's actually a figure skater. So there's kind of a bad interaction. Reese says something he shouldn't say, and she gets bitchy to him, and so she leaves with her brothers. And we now learn about Sadie, that she is basically taking care of her brothers. She's actually trying to get custody of them. Her father is a deadbeat. He's an alcoholic. The boys still live with him, but she's basically the one taking care of them. He steals money from her. He drinks all the time. He's just not home in his head. And Sadie's doing her very best, but she's barely holding it together. She works multiple jobs. She's also trying to get into the Olympics with skating, and she has a coach that's very tough on her, a very unsupportive coach, and all these things. And then having Reese be a jerk to her that one day is just like the last fucking straw, okay? So then, though, the next day, he's actually practicing on the ice when no one's there. His father gets him the key to the place so he can practice early in the morning, because he's trying to work through his panic attacks when nobody's there, so they don't see how weak he is. That's how he feels. And he actually has a panic attack on the ice, and Sadie happens to show up for ice time as well, and she sees him having a panic attack in the middle of the ice. And so she realizes it's the guy who's kind of a jerk to her, but it's not like he was a complete asshole. He just said something a little bit without thinking, right? And so it's not like she hates him or anything. But she sees him having a panic attack, and she's had a panic attack before, so she helps him out, gets him out of there, and he's just kind of like in awe of her right away. So then this happens again. He purposely shows up the same time she's going to be there, and she actually saves him from another panic attack, and this time she puts music in his ears, and it helps him like shake out of it. And so she starts making playlists for him and like sends it to him because the music she picks, I guess, is just helpful or whatever. So he slowly becomes obsessed with her because the way she helped him and the way that she doesn't treat him like he's fragile, like she makes jokes at him and teases him and busts his balls and isn't treating him like a delicate man flower because of what's going on. And like he needs that, because part of the thing is that this man has wonderful parents. Okay, I'm telling you, his parents are like the pinnacle of book parents. Okay, I love them, and I remember how much I loved them the first time. Like, I'm gonna cry right now. But rereading this book, God, his parents are some of the best stuff. I mean, they're not the best stuff, but like the way that Reese is and why he is like one of my #1 book boyfriends this year is because of his parents. This is showing you that having good parents, it doesn't always mean your kids are going to be great, but it is a big indicator of if your kids are going to be great. In how they love him, and his parents are so in love. And we even learn just a little bit about like their backstory, which could be its own book. It absolutely could, for what a beautiful story they are. Like, the mom's actually a bit older than him. He was a younger man. He was a famous hockey player, and anyway, we don't have to go into about his parents, but his parents are wonderful. But the thing is, he isn't telling his parents how fucked up he feels, because he doesn't want to disappoint them. He doesn't want them to feel like they've done anything wrong either. So he's holding all this inside, and as we get to know his parents, we're like, babe, tell your parents what's wrong. Like, they're so great. His parents are wonderful. And the whole time too, as we get little peeks at his parents, I was just waiting for it, right? I was waiting for his parents to meet Sadie, because I knew that his parents were going to love her, and they weren't going to be the judgy kind who's like, stay away from my son, you're a hot mess. I knew that they were going to be amazing. And they are fucking amazing, okay? The way that they become a found family to Sadie is so beautiful. Like, I can't even... They are a huge part why this book is so good. But I know I'm talking about them a lot, but it's not like they're in every chapter. It's not like they're a smothering thing, but they are a foundational part of this story, and why Reese is amazing and why this story works so well for me are the parents. I love them desperately. But I love Reese's relationship with her little brothers. I love how he falls for her, and they do become like a friends with benefit situation, because Reese knows that's the only way she'll let him spend more time with him, or let him spend more time with her, because she's scared of commitment. She's also very busy, like really, she's very busy taking care of her brothers and skating and working and trying to get custody of her brothers, like all of those things. But he likes her so much. And so when she asks for it, she's like, I need a release sometimes, and I'm sick of the guys I've been hooking up with. And so Reese agrees to friends with benefits, but he won't like fully have sex with her, because sex is never just sex to him. Like, he says it. This like 22-year-old guy is like, when I have sex with you, it's going to be because we're together, but you can come to me and I'll get you off and I'll get off. But like, we're not having sex until you're sure, because it would hurt me. And I love that he has that standard, but he also doesn't make her feel bad about it. He's like, we'll still have fun. But he's like, I got to protect that part. And she respects that, right? And so it means that in this new adult, like college romance, the first time that these two are fully intimate together, it is as powerful as anything. And it's not because the sex is the most mind-blowing thing in the world. It's because Reese set the precedent that we're not having sex until we're really in it. Like, that's what I need. And to have him have that standard, and it's not because he's being judgy or because he's like, thinks less of her. It's because he thinks like of it, he's protecting himself, and that he's not going to do that until she's sure about him, because it's important to him too. And so the first time that they do it all the way, right, it's so beautiful, because we know what it means. We know what it means for them. And he's so encouraging. This man is like the words of affirmation king, okay? He gets the gold crown. He gets the Stanley Cup of words of affirmation, okay? And in being steady. And so guys, this book is really close to being number one. The only reason it's not is because of what number one is, and we're going to get to those. But what sold it, and I for the most part haven't done too many spoilers in this one here, but I am for this one going to. So if you are already sold, you can skip to what my favorite is, but I want to talk about this for just a second. What pushed this over the edge is I was loving everything. It was going so good. And when I was annotating this, I was like, I'm scared what the third act is going to be. If they have a third act breakup, I'm going to be really sad, because it takes a long time for them to get together in this, right? Because they're friends with benefits, and she's trying to keep him at a distance, and it's tough. Her brothers love him. Her brothers love her parent, like all these things. And there is a thing where he sees what her dad is like, and she's like, he's going to leave me now. So she's going to be really mean to him. And we have Reese's POV, and he sees what's happening. And he's like, in his head, he's like, she's going to try to hurt me. He's like, she's going to say really mean things so that I'm the one that leaves. And he's in his head is like, I'm not going to react. I'm not going to hold it against her. I'm going to let her do it, and then I'm going to reaffirm. Like, he's thinking all those things, right? And so it happens. She has a panic where she's like, I can't have this man rely on me. I can't have him love me. Like, I'm a hot mess. And so she does. She says some mean things to him. And he just waits. And he's like, are you done? He's like, are you done trying to push me away? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, I'm going to forgive you for saying that, but that hurt. Like, you just hurt me with that because that's not true. And then he's like, I'm not leaving you. I promised your brothers. I promised you. I'm not leaving you. We're going to figure this out. You don't have to do this alone. I'm not leaving. And you can't scare me away by saying mean things. You know, it's like, if we ever break up, it's not going to be when you've said something mean to me. And the fact that this 22-year-old man is so emotionally intelligent, people can say that's unrealistic, but you know what? It's not always. It's not. And you know why it's not? Because, again, his parents are like this. His parents have had good communication with him, and he knows what's happening. He knows what's happening with his girlfriend. He can see it. He's watched the pattern of behavior. When he would get close, she would lash out. When he would do this, she would push back. When they'd have a really emotional moment, she needs to put her walls up. So of course, when he sees her at her most vulnerable, with her father making a scene, with him seeing like how like bad her home life is, he knows she's going to try to push him away. And what makes this so fucking great is that in any other story, he might even have known what she was doing. You know, he might even have been like, oh, she's being mean. But in any other story, that hero would have left that night and been like, I'll just give her a moment. I'll come back tomorrow. And then that leads to like a third act breakup where they're both too embarrassed to say anything and they don't. And Reese is like, no, I'm not leaving just because you got all porcupine and prickly on me. Like, I'm staying. And even if you don't want to be with me anymore, I'm not leaving you alone. I'm your friend first. I'm there for your brothers, and I'm there for you. And he's a fucking hero, you guys. He's amazing. And some people think he's a pushover. I've heard all of the complaints, and they're invalid. Okay, I'm telling you. Yes, is he sweet as hot chocolate? Is he as delectable as milk chocolate bonbons? Yes. Are your teeth gonna hurt from how sweet he is? Yes. But guess what? We deserve a hero this good once in a while, okay? I love my bad boys. My list is full of them. I love a bad boy. But this man is real goals. Like, he is perfect. And I've discussed about this for way too long, but this book is epic, okay? And if we were talking about like a single book to read, I know this is going to be a series. I know. But if we're talking about a single book I recommend, a book that is now on my list of I recommend to everyone, it's this one. It's this one. I have very few books that I don't need a qualification for why people should read it, right? There's usually like, oh, if you like this, or like, no. This is on the list of like everyone should read it, right? Along with The Takeover and Heartless and Outlander. Like, those are books on my list of like, I can recommend them to anyone and I'm not going to qualify. This is at the top of that list now. Probably right under Outlander, right? Because it was perfect. And the third act conflict in this, like, she does push him away. She does set up boundaries. But he's like, I'm just going to wait right here on the other side of your boundary. You know, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to wait right here. And when you're done with this, like, I'm here. I'm not leaving. And I love it because even her little brothers are a bit nervous. Like, the brothers say, you know, that. So I'm going to read this part and then we'll be done. We'll go on to the favorite here. So this is after she's done that and said all the things. And she's like, I need us to slow down, Reese. And he's like, we're not breaking up. And she says, no, I don't want to break up. I don't know. I can't love you how you want me to right now. There's nothing left in me. All right, he says. And then I hold her face in my hands and I let her nuzzle into my palm with her eyes closed. But here's the deal, Gray. You're going to let my parents help, okay? My dad will help with the custody and the lawyer stuff. My parents and Bennett and Freddie and Bo and me. We are all going to help you, okay? If you need some space and some time, you need to move a little slower, it's fine. I'll give you that, but you will not be alone. Okay? Okay, she agrees. And as I trace my thumb along the cluster of freckles beneath the corner of her eye, I kiss her on the forehead solidly. I'll be here for whatever you need. And then in his head, he says, even if it's not me. So he's perfect. Like, he's perfect, you guys. He's perfect with her brothers. He's perfect for her. And this book is amazing. So, wow, I really didn't think I would talk about it so much, but my reread just solidified it. It's absolutely wonderful. It's great. So, this video is already so epic, but some of you probably already peeked. Some of you probably know I've mentioned it, but it's okay because I'm not going to go into full detail about this story. I'm still planning to do a spoiler review video of these, but my favorite books this year are a trilogy. They are dark and twisty. They are polyamorous. They are partially incestuous. No, they're not. I'll explain. And they absolutely ripped me to shreds. And that is the Frozen Fate trilogy by Pam Godwin. And this trilogy is almost like 4 years of work that she's done putting into this series. It is so, so epic. So this trilogy starts with The Hills of Shivers and Shadows. Then there's Cage of Ice and Echoes. And then there's Heart of Frost and Scars. And they are one complete story. You have to read them in order. It's a continuing saga of Frankie and Leo and Cody and Monty and Wolf and Denver, the devil who looks like Brad Pitt. And this series starts out as a captor and multiple captives. There is essay of children that happened in the past. We don't see it, but we know it happened. And Frankie gets kidnapped and thrust into this situation. And Denver, this evil, completely sick, twisted individual, brings her to his crazy little scary place in the Hills of Shivers and Shadows. And now she's trapped there with him and his 3 sons. And what happens to her there, what she finds out, the way that they survive, and then what happens when they get out. And she now is in love with other men, and she still has a husband, and there's still someone trying to kill her. There's so much that happens in this series. And, seriously, I don't do the tabby tabs very often, but this series, needed it to happen. I still have to tab the last book. But this series is everything. It's amazing. And so you definitely should read it. The first 2 books have audio. The 3rd audio is coming in January. And also, this is just a quick little plug at the end. I will be doing annotated book pre-order, and I will be doing it for this series. It's going to be pretty expensive because these books are expensive, and if you can't tell, I wrote like crazy in these, but these will be available for annotation soon. I'll be doing that in the next couple weeks. But anyway, this series was so powerful. I loved Frankie's journey. I loved getting to know all of the men. I loved the reveals. I loved I didn't love the secrets. The secrets are twisted as fuck, but I liked how we figured them out. If you buy physical copies of these books, she actually has her own art in them that she's done. Pam designed all of the art. Let me grab one of them here. She's done all of the art herself. They're absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, this trilogy was just amazing. I know I'm not the only one that this is their favorite books this year, and that's why it kind of almost sits above everything else. And this trilogy isn't going to be for everyone. This first book particularly, you find out some truly horrifying things. But now that I've read the whole trilogy, and I've read it a couple times, I don't find it quite as disturbing. But of course, it's now because I know. And it feels more heavy when you are discovering what it was. And once you know, it's already in your mind and it's there, and it's not quite, it's still horrifying. The things that happen were, but it doesn't read as horrifying once you do, But it was amazing. I was so lucky to get to interview Pam at the beginning of last year. I interviewed her right after this one came out. I treasure that interview so much. It was amazing. And I think she's a truly talented woman. And there's a spin-off series that's supposed to be coming about one of the characters who didn't get an HEA yet, because this is a why choose. She does end up with 3 men at the end of this. And why I said it's mildly incestuous, those 3 men are all related in some way. They don't have any sword crossing scenes. That's why I say it's not technically incestuous. But some people might feel that way when there's a harem. They feel that way about it. But I think it's fascinating, honestly, how it all worked. And when I first heard about the series, Pam was marketing it as MMF. She didn't delineate between MFM or MMF. And so I thought it was going to be more incestuous than it was, because I thought there was going to be sword crossing. But she doesn't do that. We don't do that. So those of you who are worried about it, it's Pam Godwin. I would have went with it if she did. Like, honestly, I would have. But, you know, it doesn't quite go the way of Kay Webster in here. But I very rarely enjoy why choose that don't have sword crossing. That's why it surprised me how truly deeply I did like it. And I did also believe the relationship. But in a strange way, I actually believe the why choose because of that familial part where the men are all related, because they still have a loving relationship between each other. It's just not sexual, which is good. It shouldn't be. But it makes me believe that they'll work as a unit because there is love and connection already, right? It isn't just 3 alphas from all over the place who agreed to do this. So anyway, this has been far, far, far too long. This video is going to take me hours to get edited and uploaded, so it's time to say adieu. But there we are at the end of it. These are all of my favorite reads of 2024. Please let me know yours down below. I'll have links for all of these books. I also have links to my Patreon and channel memberships if you'd like to support me here, or my wish list if you'd like to send me a single book as, you know, thank you for recommendations or things like that. That's always appreciated here. Keep my addiction going. And we'll see you in the next video coming soon. Very excited for January. Bye, everyone.